The lingering echoes. It began like any other day at Crestwood Middle School, with the morning announcements echoing over the intercom. Students filled the hallways, chatting and laughing as they made their way to class. 8th grader Mia Sanders was finishing her math homework in homeroom when the principal's voice broke through the chatter, trembling slightly. "Attention, students and staff. This is a lockdown. This is not a drill. Please proceed with the lockdown protocol immediately." Mia's heart skipped a beat as her teacher, Mr. Callahan, sprang into action. He locked the door, turned off the lights, and motioned for the students to huddle against the far wall. The room fell silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Mia clutched her backpack, her mind racing. A dozen questions fought for dominance. Was there someone dangerous in the building? Were her friends safe? Was this really happening? The seconds felt like hours. A faint sound of hurried footsteps echoed from the hallway, growing louder with each passing moment. Mia's gaze darted to the door, where the thin strip of glass revealed shifting shadows. The handle jiggled once, twice, then stopped. The air grew thick with tension. In the darkness, Mia's phone buzzed. She hesitated, then checked the screen under the cover of her backpack. It was a text from her best friend, Lily, who was in a different class. "Heard there's someone with a weapon near the science wing. Stay safe." Mia's breathing quickened. She glanced at Mr. Callahan, who gave her a reassuring nod. He held up a hand, signaling for everyone to remain silent. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Then, a sudden knock at the door shattered the stillness. 3 sharp raps, followed by a muffled voice. "This is Officer Blake with the Crestwood Police Department. The building is secure. You can come out now." Mr. Callahan hesitated, his eyes narrowing. "What's the code word?" he called out. A pause. "Eagle," the voice replied confidently. Mr. Callahan relaxed and unlocked the door. Outside, uniformed officers were guiding students and teachers to the gymnasium, where parents were already gathering. Relief flooded through Mia as she spotted her mom, who enveloped her in a tight hug. In the following days, details emerged. The lockdown had been triggered by a sighting of a man near the school's perimeter holding what appeared to be a weapon. Thankfully, it turned out to be a false alarm. A maintenance worker carrying a piece of equipment mistaken for a rifle. Despite the misunderstanding, the school community grappled with the emotional aftermath. Mia found herself replaying the events of that day over and over. The fear, the uncertainty, the knock at the door, all of it lingered like an unwelcome shadow. Her parents encouraged her to talk about her feelings, but the words wouldn't come. It wasn't until her English teacher assigned a creative writing project that Mia found her voice. She poured her heart into a short story titled "The Day the World Stopped," weaving her emotions into every sentence. When she read it aloud to the class, her voice wavered, but she pressed on. Her classmates listened intently, many nodding in understanding. By the time she finished, the room was filled with an unspoken connection, a shared experience that words had finally brought to light. The school decided to publish Mia's story in the monthly newsletter. It struck a chord with parents and students alike, sparking conversations about preparedness, communication, and mental health. Counselors organized group sessions for students to share their thoughts and fears, while administrators worked to improve lockdown protocols based on feedback from that day. For Mia, the experience became a turning point. She realized the power of storytelling to heal, connect, and inspire. Years later, she would go on to study journalism, determined to give a voice to those who felt unheard. The echoes of that day at Crestwood Middle School never truly faded, but they transformed into something powerful. a reminder that even in moments of fear, courage, and connection could light the way forward. The librarian's secret. It was a grey, rainy afternoon at Oak Ridge High School, and the students in the library were quietly absorbed in their work. The faint hum of computers and the soft rustle of pages created a soothing backdrop. Jane, a junior, was seated near the window, sketching in her notebook as raindrops traced lazy paths down the glass. The calm was broken by the shrill blare of the intercom. "Attention all staff and students." The principal's voice was taut with urgency. "This is a lockdown. I repeat, this is not a drill. Initiate lockdown procedures immediately." A collective pause gripped the library as everyone froze, the weight of the announcement sinking in. Mrs. Hargrove, the librarian, was the first to move. She locked the doors, turned off the lights, and guided the students into the storage room at the back. "Stay quiet," she whispered, her usually cheerful demeanor now serious. Jane clutched her sketchbook as the room filled with whispered questions. "What's happening? Is someone in the school?" The uncertainty hung heavy in the air. Jane's mind raced. She had heard about lockdown drills, but this was different. This was real. The storage room was cramped, lined with shelves holding boxes of books and supplies. Mrs. Hargrove positioned herself near the door, her silhouette barely visible in the dim light filtering through a small vent. The faint sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, sending a ripple of tension through the group. Jane's phone buzzed in her pocket. She hesitated, then peeked at the screen. A text from her friend Mia read, "Rumor is someone with a gun is in the science building. Are you okay?" Jane's heart pounded as she quickly typed back, "In the library storage room. Safe for now." The footsteps grew louder, stopping just outside the library. The door handle rattled. Someone knocked. 3 deliberate taps. The group stiffened, breaths held as Mrs. Hargrove motioned for silence. The knocks came again, harder this time. A muffled voice called out, "This is Officer Jenkins. You can come out now." Mrs. Hargrove didn't move. "What's the clearance code?" she called through the door, her voice steady. A pause. I don't have a code. Just open up," the voice insisted. Mrs. Hargrove shook her head. "I need the code before I unlock this door." The voice on the other side grew agitated, muttering something inaudible before footsteps retreated down the hall. The group exhaled collectively, but the tension remained. Minutes felt like hours. Jane stared at the vent, focusing on the sound of rain against the roof to calm her nerves. Suddenly, another sound broke the quiet, a faint creak of floorboards outside the storage room. Mrs. Hargrove stiffened, signaling for absolute silence. The handle of the storage room door turned slowly. The door didn't open. Mrs. Hargrove had wedged a chair under the handle, a precaution Jane hadn't noticed until now. Whoever was outside jiggled the handle a few more times before the sound of footsteps retreated once more. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the intercom crackled to life. "Students and staff, the lockdown has been lifted. Please remain where you are until authorities arrive to escort you." The group stayed put, reluctant to believe it was truly over. Moments later, uniformed officers entered the library, clearing the space. Mrs. Hargrove removed the chair and led the students out. Jane's legs felt shaky as she stepped into the hallway, now filled with officers and concerned staff. The school's principal addressed the students later that day. The lockdown had been triggered by a report of a suspicious person on campus. While the individual had been apprehended without incident, they had managed to enter the science building before fleeing. In the days that followed, Mrs. Hargrove became a quiet hero among the students. Her quick thinking and calm demeanor had kept them safe. Jane, inspired by the librarian's bravery, decided to sketch a portrait of her as a thank you. The drawing depicted Mrs. Hargrove standing tall, a reassuring presence amid chaos. When Jane presented the portrait, Mrs. Hargrove smiled warmly. "Thank you, Jane. But remember, courage doesn't mean not being afraid. It means doing what's right, even when you are." The words stayed with Jane, a reminder of the quiet strength she had witnessed that day. The lockdown led to changes in the school's safety protocols. More drills were conducted, and staff were trained to handle high-stress situations. Students were encouraged to share their experiences, and counselors were made available to help process the lingering fear. Jane's sketch of Mrs. Hargrove was framed and hung in the library, a symbol of resilience and unity. For Jane, it marked a turning point, a realization that even in the darkest moments, acts of courage and kindness could light the way forward. Shadows in the gym. The day started like any other at Ridgeview High School. The morning announcements buzzed through the intercom. Teachers handed out assignments, and students half listened, thinking only of the upcoming weekend. Jack Thomas, a senior, was in gym class, half-heartedly dribbling a basketball. The gym echoed with the sound of sneakers squeaking on polished wood and the occasional laughter of students. Then, the alarm blared. At first, everyone froze. The sound wasn't a fire alarm or a bell signaling a drill. It was the unmistakable tone for a lockdown. The gym teacher, Mr. Owens, dropped his whistle and bolted to the door. "Everyone, against the wall, now!" he barked, his voice tight with urgency. Confused murmurs rippled through the class as they shuffled to the far side of the gym. Jack's heart pounded as he joined the others, pressing his back against the cold concrete. Mr. Owens locked the doors, shut off the lights, and whispered, "Stay quiet." The gym, once filled with energy, now seemed vast and suffocating in the darkness. A tense silence blanketed the room, broken only by the sound of a student's stifled sob. Jack glanced at his best friend, Marcus, who was sitting next to him. Marcus's normally cocky demeanor was gone. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. Minutes dragged by, feeling like hours. Then, faintly, the sound of footsteps echoed outside the gym. They were slow, deliberate, and growing louder. The entire class stiffened. Jack felt his throat tighten as he tried to control his breathing. The footsteps stopped right outside the gym door. A sharp knock shattered the silence, followed by a man's voice. "This is Officer Daniels with the Ridgeview Police Department. The situation is under control. You can come out now." Mr. Owens didn't move. "What's the clearance phrase?" he called out, his voice steady but low. There was a pause. Then the voice said, Safety first?" Mr. Owens shook his head and mouthed to the students, "Stay down." The handle of the gym door jiggled violently, followed by a loud bang. Someone was trying to force their way in. A girl near Jack whimpered, and he instinctively reached for her hand, squeezing it to reassure her, though he felt anything but calm. The banging stopped. Heavy footsteps retreated down the hall, fading into silence. Mr. Owens motioned for everyone to stay put. Jack's mind raced. Who was out there? What did they want? He couldn't shake the image of the door rattling, the figure on the other side determined to get in. Suddenly, Jack's phone buzzed in his pocket. He hesitated, then carefully pulled it out, shielding the screen from view to avoid the glow giving them away. It was a text from his younger sister, Ella, who was in 9th grade. "Are you okay? I'm in the music room. Someone said they saw a man with a gun." Jack's stomach churned. He quickly typed back, "I'm okay. Stay hidden. Don't make any noise." Another sound drew his attention, a faint metallic clink from somewhere deeper in the school. It was followed by a muffled thud. then nothing. The tension in the gym was unbearable. Jack felt like every nerve in his body was on edge, his senses hyper-aware of every creak and whisper. Time dragged on. Mr. Owens crouched near the door, his ear pressed against it. Jack could see the beads of sweat on the teacher's forehead, the strain in his posture. He wondered how long they'd been sitting there. An hour? 2? It felt endless. Finally, the intercom crackled to life. "Attention all students and staff." The principal's voice trembled but was clear. "The lockdown has been lifted. Law enforcement is securing the building. Please remain in your locations until officers reach you." The room remained silent. Mr. Owens didn't move, his eyes still trained on the door. Minutes later, there was another knock, followed by a firm, confident voice. "Ridgeview Police. The area is secure. You're safe to come out." This time, when Mr. Owens asked for the clearance phrase, the officer immediately replied, "Raven's Nest." Mr. Owens unlocked the door cautiously. Outside stood 2 uniformed officers, their expressions serious but calm. "Everyone, follow us to the auditorium," one of them instructed. "We'll explain everything there." As they filed out, Jack felt a wave of relief mixed with lingering dread. The hallways were lined with officers, some carrying rifles, their presence both reassuring and unnerving. Jack's eyes darted around, searching for Ella. He spotted her near the music room, her face pale but unharmed. They exchanged a quick hug before being ushered into the auditorium. The principal stood on the stage, flanked by police officers. He addressed the students, his voice shaking but determined. "Earlier today, a suspicious individual was spotted near the school. They attempted to enter the building but were apprehended before causing harm. Your teachers and staff acted swiftly to protect you, and I want you all to know that you are safe now." The words brought some comfort, but the weight of the experience lingered. Jack couldn't stop thinking about the man outside the gym door, the voice pretending to be an officer. What if Mr. Owens hadn't been so cautious? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. In the weeks that followed, the school conducted debriefings, updated protocols, and brought in counselors to help students process their emotions. Jack, however, found it difficult to move on. The memories of that day felt like a scar etched into his mind. Eventually, he channeled his feelings into action. He joined a student-led safety initiative, working to improve emergency plans and ensure everyone knew what to do in a crisis. For Jack, it was a way to reclaim a sense of control and turn fear into purpose. The events of that rainy afternoon at Ridgeview High would never be forgotten. But in the aftermath, the community grew stronger, united by the shared understanding that vigilance and courage could make all the difference when shadows loomed in the halls, love in the crossfire. The sun beat down on Oakwood High's outdoor track, where the junior class was in the middle of their physical education session. The air was thick with the scent of freshly cut grass and the rhythmic sound of sneakers pounding the track. Lily Carter, a junior, was stretching near the bleachers, watching as Ethan Reynolds, the school's star swimmer, jogged past with effortless ease. She had admired him from afar for months, but they had never spoken. The moment was shattered by a sudden, sharp sound, something unnatural against the everyday noises of school life. A loud crack echoed across the field, followed by a distant scream. Coach Taylor, a seasoned and serious man, turned sharply toward the school building, his face draining of color. "Everyone, get down, now!" Panic surged through the students as they dropped to the ground, hearts hammering. Lily, trembling, clutched the grass beneath her fingers, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She turned her head slightly and saw Ethan just a few feet away, his normally composed face twisted in fear. Near the parking lot, a man clad in dark clothing was walking toward the school, gripping a rifle. He moved with terrifying intent, eyes scanning the open field. For a horrifying moment, Lily thought he had seen them. "Stay low! Crawl to the equipment shed!" Coach Taylor whispered fiercely. Lily and Ethan, along with a dozen others, began inching toward the small wooden shed at the edge of the field. Every second felt like an eternity, their movements painfully slow as they tried not to draw attention. The sound of distant sirens wailed in the background, growing louder. Gunshots rang out, sending another ripple of terror through the group. Lily felt her pulse skyrocket, but Ethan reached out, squeezing her hand briefly. "We'll be okay," he whispered. They reached the shed, huddling inside as Coach Taylor barricaded the door with a stack of weights. The space was cramped, the air thick with fear and the scent of sweat and cut wood. Outside, the gunman had made his way into the main building. The lockdown alarm blared, signaling that the rest of the school had gone into protective mode. Police officers were already swarming the perimeter. Then, another gunshot, a louder one. This time it wasn't coming from the gunman, it was coming at him. A voice boomed over a loudspeaker. "This is the police. Drop your weapon and surrender immediately." More shots erupted. The standoff had begun. Inside the shed, Lily squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself to block out the chaos. Ethan's voice was soft beside her. "Hey, stay with me. Think about something else." Lily let out a shaky breath. "Like what?" "Like your art. I've seen your murals in the school hallway. They're incredible." Lily blinked, momentarily distracted. You like my art?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, it's beautiful." Despite the situation, a warmth spread through Lily's chest. It was the last thing she had expected in a moment like this, to feel something other than fear. She glanced at Ethan, really seeing him for the first time beyond his reputation. A final resounding shot cut through the tension. Silence followed. Then, after an agonizing pause, the loudspeaker crackled again. "Suspect is down. Officers are securing the area. Remain where you are until you are escorted to safety." Relief washed over the group like a crashing wave. Coach Taylor let out a breath he had been holding and turned to his students. "We stay here until they come for us." Minutes later, uniformed officers arrived, their calm voices soothing the panicked students. They were led out of the shed one by one. When Lily stepped outside, the world looked different, sharper, more real. The once peaceful school grounds were now a crime scene, littered with shell casings and flashing lights. Ethan walked beside her, their hands brushing. "We made it," he murmured. Lily turned to him, her lips parting slightly. "Yeah, we did." For a moment, it felt like they were the only two people left in the world. In the midst of fear and chaos, something unspoken passed between them, a connection, fragile but real. In the days that followed, the school community leaned on each other for support. Counselors were brought in, security protocols were revised, and students spoke openly about their experiences. Lily and Ethan, once near strangers, found themselves spending more time together, walking the halls side by side, sharing whispered conversations about things far removed from fear. The lockdown had changed them, but in its aftermath, they had found something neither expected, the start of something new, something hopeful, and maybe, just maybe, something like love. Shadows behind the desk. It was a quiet Wednesday morning at Blackridge High, and the students of Mr. Carter's design and technology class were busy working on their woodworking projects, the smell of sawdust and varnish thick in the air. The rhythmic hum of drills and the occasional sharp sound of metal on wood filled the workshop. The school was alive with the sound of creativity until a sharp, ear-piercing gunshot shattered the tranquility. Elena Dawson froze mid-sand, the coarse grit paper slipping from her fingers. Across the room, Sam Nichols dropped his measuring tape, his face draining of color. The classroom, once filled with the sounds of industry, fell into eerie silence. Then came another shot. Mr. Carter, a broad-shouldered man with years of experience handling students in high-stress environments, immediately sprang into action. "Everyone away from the windows, now!" he barked, shoving a work table against the door. Elena's hands trembled as she ducked behind a tool cabinet, Sam crawling in beside her. Their breaths came in rapid gasps as the reality of the situation set in. A lockdown. Then came the sound of heavy boots stomping down the hallway. Elena risked a glance toward the workshop door. The small window in the center revealed a shadow passing by, the unmistakable silhouette of a rifle slung over a shoulder. The figure stopped. The handle jiggled. A voice, chilling and familiar, drifted through the door. "You locked me out, after all I did for this school." It was Mr. Alden, the former chemistry teacher. Sam clamped a hand over Eleanor's mouth before she could gasp. Whispers spread among the huddled students. Mr. Alden had been let go the previous semester, dismissed after a heated argument with the administration. There had been rumors, murmurs of an unfair firing, but no one had expected this. Alden pounded on the door. "You all took my job away, my career. You think I'd just walk away?" Then, another gunshot. Closer this time, sending a shower of wood splinters flying as a bullet pierced the classroom door. Students whimpered, clutching each other in fear. Mr. Carter signaled for them to remain silent, his jaw tight with focus. He grabbed a screwdriver, the closest weapon available, and motioned for everyone to stay down. Outside, the pounding footsteps retreated. Then silence. Seconds turned to minutes. Every creak in the building sent Elena's heart racing. Sam pressed closer, his shoulder against hers. "We'll be okay," he whispered, though his voice shook. Then, sirens. The distant wailing sound of police vehicles approaching sent a new wave of tension through the classroom. Outside, commands were being shouted. Then a voice boomed over the loudspeaker. "Mr. Alden, drop your weapon immediately." Alden's voice was hoarse with rage. "No, you won't take anything else from me." Gunfire erupted. A deafening series of shots rang out, each one making the students flinch. Elena squeezed her eyes shut, counting down the seconds in her head, willing this nightmare to end. Then, silence. A long, dreadful pause. Then the intercom crackled. "Suspect is down. Officers are securing the building." Elena felt her entire body slump against the cabinet in relief. Sam exhaled a shaky breath, and before she knew it, he had wrapped his arms around her. She didn't push him away. They had made it. The door was forced open minutes later, uniformed officers filing in. Mr. Carter guided the students out one by one, his voice reassuring despite the exhaustion in his eyes. As they stepped into the hallway, Elena saw the aftermath. Shattered glass, bullet holes in lockers, and a swarm of officers surrounding the lifeless form of Mr. Alden. It was over. In the days that followed, the school grappled with the horror of what had happened. Grief counselors were brought in, students shared their stories, and the hallways of Blackridge High felt heavier than ever before. But amid the darkness, something else had formed. A connection. A bond between those who had faced the terror together. Elena and Sam, once casual classmates, now found themselves sitting closer, or she walking the halls side by side, speaking in hushed tones about what they had survived. It was a friendship forged in fear, but perhaps in time, it could become something more. And though the school would heal, the echoes of that day would never truly fade.